It began with a letter from a homesick young Irish priest to his mother in the spring of 1912. Father Edward Galvin couldn't begin to fathom the trials and the joys that would soon envelop his life. He had agonized over this decision, and all he knew was that he must go. He wrote, "I'm sorry, dear mother, to have to write this letter. May God's will be done. Everything is in His hands. I am not going back to Ireland. I am going as a missionary to China." Father Edward Galvin first traveled to China in 1912 and was deeply moved by what he saw. There were millions of friendly, industrious people who, because of a lack of missionaries, knew nothing of Christ.
Bishop Galvin had very deep ideas, and he was eaten up with the idea of saving those people. Spiritually. There's no doubt about that. That was his top priority.
Father Galvin rarely let the difficulties overwhelm him. Rather, he saw and felt the needs of the people. He soon realized that he was only one man, and there was so much work to be done. Amazed and challenged by the potential for conversion, Galvin knew the cause would require many more missionaries and an organization. He was persuaded to return to Ireland, where he met Father John Blowick, a renowned professor at Maynooth, Ireland's major seminary.
Blowick had the connections. Blowick had the ability to go in and talk with bishops and say, no, this just isn't a crazy project. I mean, we have the ability to do it. And I think if it hadn't been for Blowick, it would have been a very tough sell for this young priest from the wilds of County Cork.
And God brought them together. There's no doubt about it that they would spark the Columban Fathers.
The powerful combination of Galvin and Blowick raised funds, recruited willing companions in Ireland and America, and on June 29, 1918, with the blessing of the Pope, created a new missionary society, the Columban Fathers. In 1920, with the society already numbering 40 priests and 60 seminarians, Father Galvin led the first Columbans to China, while Father Blowick devoted his energies to organizing the new society. Having established its world headquarters in Ireland, the new society was ready to establish its North American headquarters. The Columbans chose the Midwest, Nebraska, because of a kindly offer from Omaha's Archbishop Jeremiah Hardy, who had once met Father Galvin as he was passing through the area. Working out of a small house in Omaha, the Columbans looked for a more permanent setting and found a 215-acre site about 5 miles from Omaha, overlooking the small community of Bellevue, Nebraska. On September 1, 1921, the cornerstone of the building was laid, and the work began. There were 12 seminarians that first year at St. Columban's, preparing the way for others. Future missionaries came and went. Office staff grew. The barren hilltop also grew along with the surrounding area.
And when the bishop saw it, he sent for all of us, we were all young priests, to come down. So we came down from the mountain, and all he wanted was to go out and baptize the dying. And we'd crawl in and out of these little huts and anoint the people that were dying of smallpox, and the flesh would come away with your thumb. Now that's true. I must say it was probably the hardest work I ever did in China, was that 1 year and a half, every day, out on the hills, chasing in and out of these little huts and anointing the people and baptizing the babies. I think I baptized about 100 babies every day for a year and a half.
From 1921 to 1950, China was in constant chaos. The Columbans endured annual floods and disease that sometimes took over 1 million lives. They outlasted Chinese bandits, civil war, and Japanese occupation when Galvin was dubbed the most bombed bishop in the world. Father Galvin was consecrated Bishop of Hanyang in 1927. In the midst of continuing turmoil, rather than weakening the appeal of the church, Bishop Galvin found the church continued to grow and flourish.
Galvin had tremendous willpower. You think how frightening this must have been when people like the Japanese would come in and start to destroy the church, and he'd walk in front of them and say, "Get out of here," and they'd leave. I mean, he had a presence. So all of these things, he persevered through them, and he made the other people with him persevere too. And of course, a great faith that things were going to come out okay.
There's flare-ups all the time. At any moment, your life could be in danger. And yet, you learn to live with that because the people have to live with it too.
From the beginning, the Columban Fathers have been priests of the people, willing to be part of another culture, willing to lend a hand to those in need, and willing to sacrifice.
I remember as a young priest getting a notification in one letter saying 8 of them are dead, you know, and I was shocked.
And they came one night and picked me up, and I was away for 2 years and 8 months. Nobody knew where I was. They didn't know whether I was alive or dead. But I was in solitary confinement. That's their treatment. The cell was just the width of my arms. And you weren't allowed talk, you weren't allowed cough, you weren't allowed sneeze. You were solitary. You never saw any other prisoner. You were never allowed to close your eyes in the daytime. They watched you. And even though they might have you up for interrogation all night long, 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, perhaps a week, and you're expected to stay awake in the daytime. And each time they find you with your eyes closed, they punish you. One day I noticed there was a bird outside the cell, hopping around. He was hungry, obviously, and I kept him a little rice. And then I noticed that now and again he would whistle, fly away and sit on the top window. And 10 seconds after he flew away, the guard came. Now, I never knew what the guard was. Never. Couldn't know. But when the bird flew away, I knew he was coming. So when the bird came back, I could relax and I could close my eyes and sing a little song to myself and so on. So did you never leave that cell? Yes, I did. Often. They would come in and they would make you pick up your few bits of things and put a sack on your head and lead you out to some other cell. And after about 5 minutes, the bird would arrive. It was like a miracle. Just like a miracle.
The society grew from a handful to a few dozen to hundreds. The original mission to China had become a mission to the world. And even where the dangers were less severe, there were always the hardships, the frustration, and the rewards. Everywhere, Columbans standing by their people in time of need.
The scene I witnessed was a very simple scene. The old grandmother was holding the baby, and she was looking at the dead baby.
You come back into this little village where there's nothing, and houses are made of rocks piled on each other and thatch roofs, you know?
And so they opened up on our truck and shot at us. There were a whole bunch of sick people in the truck that we were evacuating from the war zone.
And she said, "Indai, little girl, we spent everything. We even went into debt to try and keep you alive."
And you're feeling sorry for yourself. And you say, what am I doing here? Huh? And because everything's going wrong and you're cold and you're wet. And then that evening you go into a little adobe chapel. It's dark as pitch. Huh?
It was fortunate that I was hit because if I hadn't been hit, Father Paddy Reedy, who was driving, would have been hit in the head. And then we would have all been killed, of course, if the truck would have stopped. So it was a real blessing that I was chosen to stop that bullet.
And beside that, the house had nothing. There was no chair, there was no table, there was no picture on the wall, there was no food, obviously, in the house. And they had lived for generations on this farm. And their love and care for each other and their total lack of material goods just came home to me in a way because they weren't even aware of my presence.
Then all of a sudden, after the consecration, you lift up the host and you put it down and you look down and you see these adoring eyes in the middle of the Mass, adoring the host, and you say, well, that's the reason I'm here.
As we look towards the future, we celebrate the great legacy, the heroic achievements, and the lasting Christian impact of the founders and early Columbans. Today, Columbans are joining with the rest of the Church in what Pope John Paul calls the dawning of a new missionary age. This new missionary age includes lay missionaries from the United States joining Columban priests overseas. Some Columbans today are bringing their many gifts and talents home, where diverse cultures are coming together as never before. Laity from Columban missions are joining Columbans in mission work in the United States. These Columban lay missionaries from Chile add depth and perspective to diverse cultures here at home. All of this is part of a legacy that began years ago in China.
I suppose the legacy to me is really being concerned for the poor. So I think we're kind of priests of the people.
In 1952, Bishop Galvin and the remaining missionaries were expelled from China. Now, over 40 years later, another Columban has seen the legacy of the early days.
I was invited to assist the church in reconnecting with the Catholic communities in mainland China. I was the second representative of the church to meet them in over 40 years. And their devout belief at 4 in the morning, I still remember it. One candle and one book, not a book, just pages together with prayers on it. And people crowded into this farmhouse praying. This really moved me. After 40 years, how they kept their faith, how they celebrated and believed.
And so today, the Columban Fathers are still priests of the people, still doing all they can, wherever they're sent, with the same call as the early missionaries had from Bishop Galvin in the beginning.
So he sent me up to this, it was a city, a small city in the country, but he said, I'm afraid, Aidan, there's no church there, and there never will be. I have no money, and there's no house there. And he said, there never will be. Do what you can.
Hello, my name is Father Brendan O'Sullivan. I'm the director of the Columban Fathers here in the United States. I hope you enjoyed our video presentation, which we put together to celebrate our missionary story and honor the people who were part of that story. We remember Columban priests and sisters and laity who have served as missionaries overseas. We say thanks to all who have supported our work through their prayers and contributions. We can be proud of what we've done together. Together, we've been able to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and witness to the love of God by providing for the spiritual needs of people all over the world. At times, this means meeting their material needs because they're poor or they need help of some kind or another. At other times, it may simply be building up the local church, clinics, schools. You know the story. We thank the Columbans who have found their own way to be missionary all over the world. And sometimes it's just good to stop and say thanks to God for the privilege of being participants in His mission. It is God's mission, and I think we can say with Bishop Galvin, we have done what we could. So what's next? Pope John Paul II has issued a very challenging invitation. He said, I see the dawning of a new missionary age, which will become a radiant day, bearing an abundant harvest, if all Christians and missionaries and young churches in particular respond with generosity and holiness to the challenges of our time. Among the many areas of mission that challenge us as Columbans today is the reality of China. It's the reason we were founded in the first place. Today, there are 1.2 billion people there. As you know, we were expelled in the 50s with all other missionaries. We still can't preach the gospel, but there are plenty of opportunities in other ways. There's quite a number of Columbans working with Islam, which is becoming much more an area of concern in the world today. We're working with them just to try to find ways to live peacefully based on our mutual faith traditions. And as always, there's the problem of poverty and hopelessness. The needs of people are becoming even greater. We've met those needs in the past, and we'll continue to do so in the future. So what can we do about all of this? I think Bishop Galvin would simply advise us to do what you can. And we invite you to do that with us in whatever way you can. Perhaps you'll be able to be missionary by being a priest missionary or being a lay person who volunteers with us for 3 years. We'd certainly ask you to pray for us and to support us materially, whether through donations or wills or annuities. Or as somebody suggested one time, giving up a dessert once a month and sending in the proceeds. My mother used to say, you can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead. Anyway, there are as many ways to be missionary as there are people interested in mission. We invite you to be missionary. Thanks for your support in the past. We invite you to move with us into the next exciting missionary age. I guess you can't say it any better than do what you can. Thank you.